Our pocket. That's right. That's a good rhyme. How much is your electric bill?
Hey, brother. I can't. I got like 15 minutes.
We're recording.
It's like.
The rate increase for many customers this winter and provide a winter bill decrease for low-income customers. But I know that's not enough. The governor and the attorney general are providing meaningful relief this winter, but it doesn't change the fact that many Rhode Islanders can't afford utilities today and won't be able to afford them in April or August or next winter. The commission, the division, policymakers, the administration, the utility, our stakeholders, we do and we all need to continue to focus on reducing the real costs of the state's utility systems by seeking the least cost solution to policy and utility system goals. And if stakeholders are going to continue to use the utility bill to advance public policy, we must pursue fairer, progressive rate design so that the most vulnerable customers don't carry the heaviest burden of advancing other policy goals. But we can't order a PIP from the bench. We can't be arbitrary. We need proposals that are supported by evidence. That means we need the legislature to pass a PIP or to have the parties bring us a proposal for a PIP. If one person had brought us a PIP, I'd have voted for it this year. In 2018, in docket 4770, Chair Curran, Commissioner Gold, and I ordered the regular collection of data to enable the parties to update Mr. Roger Colton's analysis on the incidence, depth, and age of customer arrears, and to show with evidence whether the tiered A60 discount provides low-income customers with an effective opportunity to pay their bills, and whether it provides a meaningful opportunity to avoid the loss of service due to non-payment, and whether the deferred payment agreement programs are providing an effective opportunity for customers to retire unpaid balances. I did this to enable the parties to come to us with an evidentiary basis for more progressive rates. I've been clear in my support for more progressive rate structures year after year, and I'm waiting and ready for that proposal.
Commissioner Revens, do you have any preliminary comments before we get started?
Not yet, Mr. Chairman. I will as we proceed. Thank you.
Okay, so just following the sequence that I laid out, the first is the legal standard. Now, there was an initial comments and reaction about why we couldn't just deny the rate increase and cause Rhode Island Energy shareholders to absorb all or part of it. And I identified what the legal standard was that applies to that we just can't do something we might like to do. We have to follow the law. And the standard that I laid it out both at the public comment hearing, and then I did it again with all the parties during the evidentiary hearings. And I'm going to read it again here, because every single party that was in the case agreed that this was the correct legal standard that was applicable to cost recovery. And then just to be clear, cost recovery is different from what the rates are. Cost recovery is basically a decision that says, does the utility have the right to recover the cost over some period of time in some manner? Once that's determined, then the rate making occurs as to when and what the rates would be to do that. But the standard for the cost recovery was, in order for the commission to deny the cost increase, there must be evidence to show that the utility did not comply with the acquisition plan, or that the utility acted negligently or imprudently in making the purchases. In other words, the Commission cannot order Rhode Island Energy shareholders to absorb the cost increase unless there is an evidentiary case that proves non-compliance or negligent execution of the purchase plan which caused higher costs to be incurred. And I read this again to all the parties and the attorneys, and everyone agreed that that was the applicable standard to which this Commission is bound. When we got to the end of the case, I went around the room again at the end of the evidentiary hearing and asked if anyone had determined that there was evidence that was presented in this case that would support a finding that they did not comply with the plan. And each of the parties looking at the evidence, and I know that we looked at it as well independently, had concluded that there was no evidence to suggest that they had not complied with the plan or otherwise acted in some negligent way. And so that's the standard that was never disputed by any of the parties. And And the first issue here is really the question of whether they complied. And as I look at it, I don't think there's any evidence except that they did. And I do have a motion on that, but I'll stop there to see if you have any comments.
Mr. Chairman, the only thing I'd like to add to that, so that everyone who may be looking at this today or in the future will understand what you mean by the parties. The parties that appeared before us were first the petitioner or the applicant, which is the energy company, which was asking to be reimbursed for the additional cost that they will incur to purchase electricity. But the other parties that were here at the hearing were first the Division of Public Utilities and Carriers, which was here with their staff and with a lawyer from the Attorney General's office, and their role is to advocate for the consumer at these hearings, and that's what they did. Also at the hearing representing the consumers was the Office of Energy Resources, which is the Governor's Department of Energy Resources. They were represented by counsel, and they were also here on behalf of the consumer. Thirdly, the Attorney General, separately from representing the division, was here representing the public through counsel. And lastly, there was an attorney participating in the hearings who intervened in behalf of the George Wiley Center. So that when the chair is referring to the parties, he is saying that A, the parties all agreed, including all the consumer representatives, as to what the legal standard was. And secondly, at the end of the hearing, after all the evidence had been presented, they agreed that the petitioner, the applicant, had met their burden to prove that they had properly procured the energy for the coming winter. Now, the way they procure it isn't the way we go to the grocery store and buy groceries, or go to the gas station and buy gas, or the way we call the oil company for delivery. They procure the energy according to a plan. That plan was established by this commission several years ago, long before I became a member of the commission. That plan was carefully and thoughtfully and responsibly designed after public hearings and discussion. And that plan, as the chairman said earlier in this meeting, was to spread out the acquisition of the purchase of the power over a longer period of time. And the obvious intent of that laddering and layering of the acquisition of power, which is the electricity that passes through the lines from the transmission facility to our homes and businesses, was to spread out the cost that would be incurred to purchase the power to minimize large spikes in the price. And that plan has proven effective, because this year, as we're facing this very unfortunate situation, only a smaller percentage of the power, far less than half, is being purchased this fall. All the rest of it was purchased, some of it 18 months ago, some of it 12 months ago, when prices were less. And that's reflected in the size of the proposed increase, which is far different than what we've seen at the pump and what we've seen in our oil tanks. And interestingly and sadly and unfortunately for our neighbors in Massachusetts and New Hampshire, they don't have that type of purchase of power plan. They buy it now. And their proposed rate, which I read last night on the front page of the Boston Globe, is shocking, because they're proposing to charge almost double what our electric bills will be this winter if this proposed increase is approved. Theirs is going to be twice as high for the same power. Now, why is this happening? The governor said we shouldn't blame it on Ukraine, and he's right. But there's a lot of things that you can attribute it to. I'd rather use the word attribute than blame, because I believe that every time people make decisions that are supposed to be in the public interest, they try to do that in what they think is the best way possible. So now that we don't produce power in Rhode Island except for some wind and some solar. So we have to buy it from somewhere else. So everyone who is selling power to a third party has options as to where they sell it. And it's no different than any other commodity. They sell it where they get the best price. So now that power is being constrained in Europe and other parts of the globe, it's more advantageous for some people who produce power to sell it in other places for higher prices. So that creates more competition for the product, it's in finite supply, and the price goes up. So we're faced with that. We're also faced with the fact that much of our energy is produced from gas, and that gas runs through a process and comes out the other end of it as electricity. The way we get gas is through pipelines, and the pipelines are constrained. And what that means in simple English is they don't have enough capacity to get us all the gas that we ideally would like to have. And the people who own the pipelines control what gas flows through their pipes, and that's not regulated at the state level. So that the people who control the distribution system are able to charge more money when demand goes up and the pipe is restricted. And if you want to pay more, then your gas will go through the pipe, but if you want to pay less, it doesn't. And we haven't got enough green energy available yet to make up the difference. So all of those things have combined together to put us in the situation that we're in today, in having to consider the proposal that's before us to allow the utility company, the energy company, to pass on the increased cost that they're incurring to purchase electricity to send it to our homes and businesses. So I just wanted to say that by way of background before we get into the specific discussion of the motions that will come before the Commission this morning for consideration and decision. Thank you.
Very good, thank you, Commissioner. I do have a motion that I'll make, and it's that the Commission finds that Rhode Island Energy complied with the company's last resort service procurement plan. Do I hear a second?
Second?
And any further discussion on this? On that particular finding? No?
No.
All those in favor?
Aye.
So the next item...
Mic check!
Mike, check!
Okay, look, ladies
You heard us!
and gentlemen, you know, when we have the hearings,